Good morning, everybody. Okay, so it is at least almost 10:30. I'm sure you're more awake than what I just heard. Good morning, everybody. Fantastic. Welcome to our 8th annual Cannabis Summit. I cannot tell you how many lovely faces I haven't seen in person now in 2.5 years, and it is filling my heart with a lot of happiness and joy. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. My name is Caitlin Ryan, and I am board president at the Cannabis Alliance. I am here to welcome you this morning and want to let you know that this year's Washington Cannabis Summit is proudly presented by Skagit Organics and Double Delicious. Thank you both very, very much. We are further sponsored by Moonstone Bank, Parker Smith and Feek, Snowco Packaging, Carr Tuttle Campbell, Sound Cultivation, Canasite Co., and Washington Bud Company. Yeah. Without the support of these sponsors, none of our content today would have been possible. And so here from all of us at the Cannabis Alliance, thank you, thank you, thank you. So without further ado, we have an incredible program for you today. We'll get the screen going over here, so right, pretty soon. And that's me, that's my fault, okay. I'll figure it out. For many of you, this is your first opportunity to meet our new executive director in person. I hope you have the opportunity to chat with him today. Oh, he's right behind me. Super. I'd like to introduce Burl Bryson.
Thank you. Thanks very much. First of all, thank everybody for showing up today on a Saturday, early in the morning. I'm really excited to be here after 2 years of being in COVID lockdown and Zoom meetings. It's awesome to be able to meet in person, to be able to hug some of you. Yeah, it's really awesome. So thanks very much for taking the time out of your Saturday to come down here. Thanks so much as well to the volunteers that helped set this event up, that came here early. Volunteers rock. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without the volunteers. Thanks to our board of directors, who are all volunteers, many of whom are here today. You guys are awesome. So much work goes into the background of what we do at the Alliance, and our board members are active and working members of the Alliance. And many of them put in a lot of hours unpaid and unrecognized. So thank you very much for the work that you do. And thanks for coming out today. You guys are awesome. I'd like to recognize and thank Jill Walker right here, who's our operations director. She has done the heavy lifting on organizing all this event, getting this venue, the pivoting, the phone calls, the back work, the organizing to make sure everything is perfect here. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And Caitlin as well dug in. Both of these ladies have done yeoman service. Without their efforts, Caitlin did so much of the design and the brochures that look awesome, by the way, and everything else. So her and doing the AV stuff and trying to get this TV to work. Yeah, so awesome. Thank you guys so much. I feel really sorry I stepped on your applause. I feel really thankful to be here today. I want to acknowledge as well that we're on the traditional lands of the indigenous peoples of this state. And, you know, they've been here for 1,000 years before Europeans showed up. I'm really thankful that we've got our Tribal Innovations panel today. Thanks very much to Mary Jane Oatman for making the effort to come here from Idaho. I want to thank Sue Sicily, who's one of our keynote speakers and a good friend. Adam Smith, one of our panelists and a good friend as well. Hi, Adam. And particularly Representative Shelley Kloba, who's made the effort in coming as one of our keynote speakers here today. We've got some really great panels, and I'm excited for some lively discussions with some people that are really know what they're talking about, which is fantastic, and not always me. So one of the things I put it on the brochure, but I was thinking about this, 30 years ago, when I was a young law student and smoking weed in law school, I had this conversation with a lot of my friends who also smoked weed in law school, interestingly enough, because it's a really good thing to do when you're a stressed out law student. And we all had this conversation. Well, will weed ever be legal in our lifetimes? Will this ever happen? No, it may be, I don't know, but it seemed like this impossible thing that might happen sometime before we were dead. And then 20 years ago, right around the same time as the internet started blowing up and information became more publicly available about the medicinal value of this plant, we started having medically legal cannabis in states like Washington and California and the country of Canada, where I come from originally. So that, that idea changed so quickly. And then 10 years ago, we had I-502 and we had adult use cannabis become a reality. And 10 years on, here we are. And we're here to both celebrate where we've been able to achieve as an industry, as a community of people, and then also to recognize the challenges that we still have before us. Federal legalization may be 10 years off. It may be more than that. I expected 10 years ago when I got it started in the legal industry that that things would already be here, that we would already have federal legalization at this point, but it still seems like a long road away. And so it's the hard work of so many people behind the scenes, talking to their state representatives, talking to their federal representatives, talking about the value of this plant, both as a medicine and frankly, I believe that everybody medicates for one reason or another. We've all been drawn to this plant because it works for our particular struggles and journeys through life. It certainly has in mine. I come from a medical background, and I'm trained as an advocate, and I'm a recovering attorney right now. So I promise not to sign any contracts or anything while I'm here. But I get to be an advocate for this plant. I get to be an advocate for this industry. I get to be an advocate for all of you and what you do in your businesses. And right now we're facing unprecedented times in the state of Washington. It's very difficult here. Lots of you are feeling the pain. In the conversations that I have with you, I recognize how hard you're working, how hard you're struggling, and frankly, sometimes the depression and despair that you feel from trying to work in this industry, to try to create something, to build an industry while we're building companies. And we still have a lot of work to do in shaping how this industry is going to evolve in the state of Washington. So right now we're working on our grassroots campaign to reach out to legislators, to talk to them about the value of cannabis and where this industry should go. Things need to change in Washington. It's 10 years on now in 502. There's lots of stuff that happened that, 502 was one of the first laws passed in the nation and so much has changed in the 10 years. So many things that we were afraid of when we were creating the laws in 502 never materialized. There's lots of idiosyncratic things in the legislation and regulations that don't make any sense in today's world. So it's time for a rewrite of the 502 system, something that we're calling 502.0. 10 years on now, it's time to relook at that system. And frankly, I'd like to see a ground up rewrite on it. We're working right now on an omnibus bill to try to correct a lot of the problematic things that create an uneven playing field in the current 502 landscape. And so I've been working with a lot of you, having discussions, reaching out to people, having great ideas. And so we're forming a 502.0 committee in the Cannabis Alliance right now. And so to bring the ideas, to talk about those things that are working, those things that are not working, what we can do to change and shape the cannabis laws so that when ultimately federal legalization does happen, we've created a system in Washington that is the template for these other legal states as they're coming on board. So I'm excited to dig in and do the hard work. I'm not under any illusions that it's going to be easy or that we're all going to agree on everything and all the ideas out there. But I truly believe as we come together as an industry, we can get the lion's share of it done without complaining and arguing, to really focus and hone in on those things that can make our industry better here, better serving the patients, better serving the adult use consumers in the state, and better serving the industry as well. So I'm excited about talking about some of those issues today. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with our keynote speaker, which is Representative Kloba. I don't know if I gave her enough time to eat her breakfast. Sorry about that. Just bring, yeah, we can just keep handing you bacon up here if you like. You don't need to come all the way up here, but you're welcome.
I think the black thing. Okay, this will be good. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for asking me to join you today. I really do appreciate this event. I appreciate all of you. I think this might be the 5th time I've come. There were 2 COVID ones that were remote. And actually, of all the COVID kind of convention summit type of meetings, yours was the best. So kudos to you on that. I guess I want to start by kind of giving you my concept of how I landed here. I think of myself, so I should say, Representative Shelley Kloba. I've been in this legislature for 6 years, and I represent the 1st legislative district, which is the cities of Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Bothell, Briar, Woodinville, and some unincorporated South Snohomish County. So, but I feel sometimes like an accidental tourist in the land of cannabis. And the reason I say that is because when I started into elected office, I didn't necessarily know that that's where I was going. And so I've landed here. And I think the tourist part is, you can look at your own city for, years and not see the same things that a tourist does, or not enjoy the same things. Coming at a place with new eyes, I think, is a really interesting opportunity. And so I'm glad to have it. So yeah, when I first started into elected office, I was elected to the Kirkland City Council. And it was around about 2014. And our community had voted about 65% in favor of legalization of cannabis. So great. That sounds like a great place to start a business, right? So as some of you know, that first effort into siting a store near a neighborhood didn't go well. We had folks coming out in droves in opposition of putting a store on a commercial street near a neighborhood. And so rather than just giving in to NIMBYism, the city council, and I wish I could take full credit, but of course I can't, we had a process by which we took a look at what are the things that the opponents are hoping or thinking that an appropriate place to put a cannabis store, what does that look like? Because you can't just say not here. You have to say, well, what does there look like? And so it was things like good traffic pattern, plenty of parking, because they're envisioning the kind of crowds that Colorado got on day 1, right? Well, that didn't happen. But away from a school walk route, I don't think, it seems they had fears that you all would be selling to them, and I know you're not. But whatever those fears were, we took a look at our map, and of course, something like 8% of our commercial zoning areas were outside of the 1,000-foot buffers. And so that's not much in terms of trying to locate a store in a city. And so we said, well, what other areas in our zoning laws, in our city zoning, could we fit the description that the opponents have kind of shared with us? And it turns out that we had light industrial zoning for warehouses and things like that. And we were able to change the limitation that was a 10% limitation for how much floor area you could use to sell a product in that zoning. And we said, if you are a cannabis related business, you can have 100% of your floor area devoted to sales. And so that was where we had the first store locate. And at the end of the process, and I'm telling you with experience, this doesn't happen very often, those same, opponents who were, with torches and pitchforks that came to our meetings came back, and during the public comment, they said, we felt heard. This was a good process. We are very happy with the end result, and we think that this will be good for this person's business. And in fact, I think they're still in business and doing just fine. So it all had a happy ending, but that was my introduction into a contentious issue and cannabis. So the other approach that I take to cannabis is based more on my education. So I have a degree in kinesiology and studied physiology for as a part of that coursework, and also as to get my degree or my certificate as a massage therapist. I worked in a physical therapy clinic as a massage therapist for more than 20 years, treating people with pain and dysfunction, helping them get back to normal. And so, that I think about that sciencey based approach that I take as my alter ego, which I call physiology girl. Right? And some of you have seen Physiology Girl come out, but the way that it presents itself in my approach to cannabis is that it's a little different than some of the other approaches on the committee. There are pro-business folks. There are folks who look at it through abstinence prohibition kind of a lens. There's folks who look at it through public health. There's, libertarians who look at it like, oh, hey, we should be free to do whatever we want as adults. But my approach is Physiology Girl. And I think about all of these activities that are in the purview of the Commerce and Gaming Committee, which I chair, and they are cannabis, alcohol, tobacco, and gambling. And so some people think of those, the common thread is vices, well, whatever you want to call it. I tend to think of them as activities and substances that people have used since we first figured them out. People have used them to alter their brain chemistry temporarily in a way that is pleasant or enjoyable, and they've always been around and they're not going anywhere. And so I think that approach of looking at things is somehow a little different than some of my colleagues. And, we've seen prohibition on all four of those things, and we've moved away from prohibition in many of our states on all of those things, with the exception of tobacco, which is actually we're moving more toward prohibition, which I think is interesting, but it doesn't have as much to recommend it as something like cannabis does. So I also think that when a government takes a role in regulating something like this, the purpose is generally a consumer-focused perspective, right? We're trying to make sure it's safe. We're trying to remove the criminal element. We're trying to make sure that everything is fair and people follow the rules. And I think that that's an important role for us to take. But I also think that because we derive revenue from this business, and actually all four of these, we have an obligation to make sure that we are working together with those industries to mitigate the harms that can come along with all four of those things. So that's generally the foundation that I'm working from, and how I approach the work. But so our theme today, and I'm trying to stick to it, foundation and future. So what's in our future? I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could look 5 years down the road and tell you everything, but I feel fairly certain that I can tell you what's going to happen in the next legislative session. Not the results necessarily, but I think we can pretty well forecast what we're going to be looking at. So one of the things is research, and I will continue to be a fighter for increased funding for research. As you all know, yeah. In order to make good policy decisions, we need solid science. in order to make good business decisions, you know, about the product and how it grows and what's the least amount of inputs you can get for the most amount of output and all of those things. That's information that we all need. And thank goodness we have the University of Washington and Washington State University, among others, who have their own cannabis research centers and are doing amazing work and have projects lined up that if we could fund it, they could do it. And it really runs the gamut of, you know, social sciences and, you know, cancer cures and how best to diminish underage use, and it goes on and on. And so I will continue to fight for those kinds of investments in research. I think the next sort of category of things that we think we're going to see is some work on protecting the integrity of the product and the industry. And the way we're going to do this, I think, is to make it abundantly clear that synthetically derived THC, and this is my opinion, synthetically derived THC from hemp, it has no place in the market. And what we've seen recently from actions from the LCB in a settlement case that they had with Unicorn is that they have asserted successfully that they have the authority now to make sure that to enforce the fact that it's prohibited under current rules and law in the regulated market. Also, in terms of protecting the integrity, we have to, we need to make sure that LCB has the authority to go after these products and do enforcement outside of the regulated market. Because, yeah, that's, there's no place for those synthetics in an unregulated place where they're selling it to children. It's just not appropriate. So there is some agency request legislation regarding that will be coming up. It's still in the process of getting approved, but I think just having a bill that creates some real clarity between cannabis products and hemp consumables is going to be really beneficial. Another area that is very near and dear to my heart, having been a massage therapist and worked with people in pain, is patient issues, patient access. And there will be 3 bills that I think are familiar to people. We've run them before. They're coming back. Sometimes we tweak things. Sometimes we just keep going and change a strategy. But protections from arrest for patients who are not in the registry should be, and this bill would make them exactly the same as the ones for the people who are in the registry. There's no reason why people should be treated as a second-class citizen and not have the full set of rights. So good, important to me, obviously important to all of you. Eliminating the excise tax on the medically compliant product is another one. Senator Kaiser has carried that bill for a number of years and has told me she's tired of it going to the House to die. And so we need to take care of it on the House side. So we'll be doing that. And of course, we are always going to need an army of advocates to help legislators understand the importance of that. And then finally, a bill that I inherited from Representative Brian Blake of Home Grow. I think that obviously for reasons that make sense to me and that we've seen success in other states, you should be able to grow some reasonable amount of plants in your home. And that I think is helpful for patients for obvious reasons. It's not going to help every single patient, but certainly it will be something that they're going to find useful. So let's see. Another one that we have been working on is social equity in cannabis. And as an early adopter, I look back and I can't really be in the minds of the people who wrote the initiative and thought about how it should be shaped in order for successful passage. But my view is they looked at legalizing the product, decriminalizing it as this is the way that we are going to correct all of these inequities in enforcement that have more heavily impacted folks in our communities of color. And that certainly is an equity issue, and it certainly is a good goal, but it's not enough. And I don't, for whatever reason, we didn't go as far as other states have gone since we legalized. And so I think it's incumbent on us to try to learn from them about what can we do to even this playing field and even, help people catch up who've been left behind. I think we didn't really fully address the long shadow that was cast on communities of color by the war on drugs. And so our task force, we have a social equity in cannabis task force that continues to chug along and do their work, give us some recommendations. And I haven't seen what their recommendations are going to be, and I don't know exactly whether we'll be successful in turning those from a recommendation into bill language, but I'm hopeful. But I do know that there is an agency request bill that is in the works. Again, still trying to get put together and get the approval on it. But, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to give you a caveat. These are the things that are in the bill right now. And as we know, the sausage making factory that is Olympia, things go in and sometimes something else comes out. And so I'm saying this is what's going in. There will be amendments, things will be put in, things will be taken out. It might be amended to another bill. Who knows? There's a lot of different options that you can use to get a bill across the line. But right now it has they will be authorizing additional licenses. And based on that assumption that we made originally, where with a given population, this amount of stores is going to be the right amount. Well, our population has grown, so we need to reconfigure that, add in the new population and see what does that come out to with new amount of retail licenses that we need to serve the population. So it'll be based on that growth data, and it will allow them the flexibility to locate anywhere that will have them. So as you know, tied to a specific jurisdiction, a city or a county can be very challenging. And so it allows them to go put down their roots. And then, so it's a portable license only until you start, and then that's where you're located. And then finally, it would waive the annual license fee through December of 2029. So trying to give a little leg up to folks who have been really left behind. And all right, so that's that one. And then education efforts. I think some of you went to or have read about a conference that the legislature gave the funding for, and the results were presented a couple weeks ago on the UW campus. And it was focused on a problem that we are seeing, which is that there seems to be a correlation between high intensity, high frequency use among adolescents that correlates to early onset psychosis. This is a mental condition that dogs you the rest of your life and can really present challenges in terms of staying stably housed and consistently employed. It is nothing to, it's just a serious thing. So there will be a variety of different strategies, I think, proposed. It seems to me that at least we probably, industry, public health, recovery communities, substance use prevention, everyone could probably agree on some education. And so it's not just education for young people that is important. There's also education, I think, for grownups who maybe have not been familiar with the products, are interested, but are not going to walk in the store because it's kind of intimidating. And so if they can get some common sense, factual information outside of that, I think that'll be helpful. And then the third thing is to make sure that we're educating parents how to have these conversations with their kids. And one of the things that I have seen as I've looked around, our neighbors to the north do a pretty good job. So up in BC, there's something called Here to Help. And if you Google that, you'll come across it. But it's a project of the BC Partnership for Mental Health and Substance Use Information. And this is a group that's been working on these issues since about 2003. And on their website, they say that they are a group of 7 leading mental health and substance use nonprofit agencies. And they've been working together to help people live well and better prevent and manage mental health and substance use problems. I think that's a goal that all of us can agree on. I look out at you and I know that you are all people of integrity. And it is not your intention to sell a product that's going to cause harm to your customers. I know that about you. I don't know necessarily that people who don't know you know that. So I think it's an important thing to make it obvious and state it. So anyway, research, industry integrity and product integrity, social equity, education, patient access and rights. Those are things that I think we're going to see in the future. There are probably other things coming down the pike that my colleagues have not informed me that they're hoping will come in front of my committee, but I remain hopeful that they'll give me some heads up and early warning so we can plan. But I know what I will do, and that is I want to stay focused on what is the best course of action for the entire public interest very broadly. So you have allowed me to have this space to talk. And I have to tell you, when she told me it was going to be like, oh, we'll give you 30 minutes. In my world, we get like a 3-minute floor speech. And during election time, we have these candidate forums, which are great. You get to talk to people, explain your views, but they'll ask you a question about, a big, deep issue like homelessness or mental health or the environment. And they're like, and you have 90 seconds to tell us what you think. And so this kind of feels like I have gone from steerage at the back of the plane and I am sitting in, relative comfort up here in first class. I get to spread out and really talk about my ideas. So scheduling wise, do you have time for like questions from people? I was trying to stay on time, but okay. Because I can do that y'all didn't fall asleep. So I'm really happy about that. And if you maybe have some questions, I'm happy to answer. Good.
All right. I saw one hand shoot straight up. Oh, and
Sue,
Dr. Sue Sicily, you get priority.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you for those comments. I'm a physician from Arizona, and I'm going to be speaking at the end of the day. But
Great.
I wanted to mention, when you brought up research, I was thrilled. But I want to just give a caveat for folks here who are paying into this government money that may be used to sponsor the research, that it's really crucial that you question what kind of research is going to get done, because what we see in other states is that they use the industry funds to continue to do safety studies, looking only at harmful effects of cannabis and never, so it's all really frustrating for us because we need government money to support looking at cannabis as a medicine, not just as a drug of abuse. And we have billions of dollars that have been invested over the last 4 decades into looking only at the harms of cannabis. And almost nothing looking at it as a medicine. And I can tell you this as somebody who regularly does federally regulated cannabis research, that there's almost no money. The only monies we've ever had to study cannabis as a medicine have come from smart states who prioritized that and made sure that the language in these bills said specifically that this had to be human trials, first of all, because the first thing universities want to do is pour tons of money into studying rat brains that is just, super esoteric research that nobody's going to get benefit from during our lifetime. So I just want to offer our support for you as you embark on working on this research bill, that we can give you language that will guarantee that you're getting the research that you really want, that your patients are going to be able to learn clinically relevant data on how to use the products that you're making. And so I really, want to, make sure that that we're available to you to help you with crafting that language, because it's essential. And then the other thing I just wanted to offer help to with, I know Burl mentioned there may be an omnibus bill coming out this year. I don't know. I just wanted to hear from you what you thought the makeup of the current legislature here, if they're, what is the feeling? How many members do you think will support meaningful reforms here that will improve this industry?
Well, yeah.
So by the way, I'm just going to bring the microphone to you every time, and you can ask the first audience question. Love to hear it, Shelley.
Okay, so on part A, yes, I agree with you, and I will welcome help for that. I know we've had some work. I can think of Dr. Nefe Stella, who does a lot of work. How does this product help combat cancers? So there's a really, really important frontier that we need to make sure that we're researching. So I will take that. On the second one, the composition of the legislature. So we're still in election mode. I think before the primary, there was a lot of concern that this would be a big red wave, that we would have a lot of Republicans. Now, that A doesn't necessarily mean that they're anti-cannabis. We have all kinds. And B, we didn't actually see that red wave come to fruition. So I think we can feel fairly comfortable, and this doesn't mean don't support your candidates out there. They still need your help. But I think we can feel fairly certain that the Democrats will maintain the majority in the House and Senate. And they tend to be more friendly to issues like this. Not all of them. We have a portion who are refer to themselves as the dry caucus, and that's fine. We do have some folks who really come at it from a recovery and a prevention perspective, and that's sometimes going to be at odds with the industry. But I think with an omnibus bill, there's always that tension between, do you try to go for the whole enchilada that's got bits and pieces in it, something for everyone, so that the whole industry and the patient groups and the prevention groups can all get behind it because there's something in there that they think is important. Or sometimes those are hard to get past. Sometimes it's better to split it out and have a very logical process to just take a bite at a time. And I really can't tell you which is the right way to go. It's, philosophy, and sometimes it's good to maybe have one strategy in your pocket and pursue the other strategy, kind of keep your options open. But I have listened to one discussion about some of the potential things that could be in that bill. And I really hope that we can engage in a process that helps us put, emotion aside and think about what are the various interests, and then figure out a path forward from there. Good question. Thank you.
We can take one more. Yeah, straight up.
Really, I just was calling attention to Sue had her hand up, but since I have the mic. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your ideas. That was phenomenal. One of the things that is extremely concerning to me and has been an issue that many of us here testified down in Olympia about in 2020 was the overuse by teenagers and leading to psychosis problem. And my question is, I would like to hear more about your education piece, because that's how any of this gets solved, is just education, because people aren't connecting the dots between regulation often and what happens at the end. And for example, when they start talking about this issue and they start thinking, oh, well, we're just going to limit this to 10% in every product for THC or whatever other thing, but they don't realize that in order for the industry to do that, they would have to get into preparatory chromatography to start separating out all of these different cannabinoids, and which is unbelievably expensive. And is there, do you have access? Do these legislators have access? And are they thinking about this missing piece that is crucial to the success of all of these businesses? And it just, I've just seen this happen over and over and over again, where from the genetics to the end product, that the entire process is not methodically, carefully considered. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And there, I am on my learning journey, and I will continue it for, as long as I'm alive, probably. I know that other legislators who don't have this big interest, maybe it's a little harder to get their attention and to help them understand what would be the repercussions of having some sort of limit. Does that mean that the industry would have to fill with other substances that we don't know a whole lot about the effect of as you vaporize them? They might be fine to consume digestively, but maybe it's a different story when it comes to that. And we all saw that in the lung issue that came up with the vitamin C acetate. Yeah. And so that was an unintended consequence. And I was, the industry stepped up and put that to a halt. So I was really glad to see that. And I am not a person that comes from a public health background or a prevention background, but I can tell you academically, and I know there are studies for what works and what doesn't, but I can tell you what worked for me with regard to alcohol. And now I'm going to have the caveat: alcohol and cannabis, entirely different in a lot of ways. There's not really much that tells that's a benefit of alcohol necessarily. I think what used to be like, oh, red wine. And I think they've come to the conclusion there's not really anything to recommend alcohol, but if you're going to, then be moderate. Cannabis obviously has benefits, real true benefits. And so when I was a college student, you sort of have some experiences with alcohol that are pleasant at first, and then they're not. And what was helpful for me was to have this class that I took, and it was extracurricular. It was like a 1 hour, 2 hour thing where they explained, okay, here's alcohol. Here's what it does. Here's a standard serving. And all of you probably are familiar with this: a 4 ounce glass of wine, a 1 ounce glass of liquor, or an 8 ounce beer. Those are relatively equivalent. Certainly there's differences in alcohol by volume and all of that. But relatively speaking, a person that's 150 pounds can consume one of these equivalencies in an hour. Maybe a little more than that if you have food, maybe a little less than that if you haven't eaten. There's some variability, but you can stay in a moderate, kind of enjoyable state if you do that. What is that for cannabis? I don't have a clue. And certainly some of the consumers over time just figure out what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what are the percentages, what are the types, all of that. It's a much bigger research project that you have to embark on for yourself to be, consuming safely and appropriately. But we don't have any of that. And it may be harder in cannabis because there's not necessarily a nice, neat equivalency. But I think that there could be some education around edibles. And if you don't feel anything, stop, wait before you consume more. And, the effectiveness or the action time and the length of the duration of the activity in your brain for different products and different percentages. You guys are the experts on this. I would want education that looks like that. The education that this here to help talks about is, here's how to have the conversation with your kids. Do some motivational interviewing. What do they see themselves doing in 5 years and 10 years? And does cannabis fit in for them with that vision? A lot of times the answer is no for kids. I would hope, but you can't just demonize it because they're going to have a friend who uses it to control their epilepsy. They're going to have a grandma who uses it to control their arthritis. I'm making real stereotypes here, but I don't think it's appropriate to just say, don't do it. We've seen the studies that doesn't work. So that is a very long answer, but thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Representative Kloba. I want to say, like you said, 5th year, which is incredible, because 5 years ago was a time when we couldn't sometimes get meetings in people's offices. And Representative Kloba was one of the first ones that said, no, I'm curious. I want to know more. I want to know more. And here you are, still saying the same thing and still with us, but also leading the charge. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being you. Really.
Thank you.
This is a hug situation. Don't fall off. Okay.
I'm trying to very carefully stand here. Well, and I just wanted to add, I'm going to be here for a while, so please feel free to come up and introduce yourself. Tell me what the world looks like from your slice. So thank you.